I met Nathan at a friend's engagement party. He was funny, charming, and made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. After a string of bad relationships, I thought I'd finally found someone who understood me. He wasn't flashy or arrogant, just warm, attentive, and endlessly patient. We talked for hours that night, and by the end of the week, he was calling me every morning just to say goodnight because he worked night shifts. It felt genuine. Our relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, we were living together in Austin. He always said he wanted to build a future with me. I loved that about him. He asked about my job, my dreams, and my family. I told him about my late grandfather, who had set up a trust fund for me when I turned 25. It wasn't something I bragged about, but Nathan seemed proud of me. He said I deserved it after everything I'd been through. I didn't think much of it then. We got married the following year in a small ceremony. Everything felt perfect. His friends loved me, my mom said he was the one, and I was convinced I'd found my forever person. Nathan was helpful around the house, always paying attention to what I needed. When I got sick, he took care of me. When I got promoted at work, he celebrated with flowers and wine. I couldn't have asked for more. But there were moments that made me uneasy, even if I ignored them. He asked little things about my trust fund, how much it was, who managed it, when I could access it fully. He phrased it like curiosity, but it always felt slightly too specific. Still, I brushed it off. Married couples shared everything, right? Sometimes he'd joke about me being the rich one in the relationship. I laughed it off because he said it with a smile. But as months passed, those jokes turned into subtle comments. He started asking if we could invest together or buy a house in both our names. When I hesitated, he'd look hurt and say things like, "Don't you trust me?" I started feeling guilty, like I was doing something wrong for wanting to protect what my grandfather left me. Looking back, I can see the signs so clearly. But at that time, I was in love, and I wanted to believe in us. He was attentive, affectionate, and made me feel safe. I had no reason to doubt him, or at least that's what I told myself. The day I noticed something off was subtle. We were having dinner, and he casually mentioned meeting with a financial advisor, just to get ideas. It seemed harmless, but the way he said it, the confidence in his tone, made something in me freeze. My instincts whispered that something wasn't right, but my heart wasn't ready to listen. I wish I had, because that small moment was the beginning of the truth unraveling. Truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my trust, and the man I had given everything to. At first, life with Nathan felt like everything I had dreamed of. We bought a cozy home in a quiet Austin neighborhood, with big windows and a porch where we'd drink coffee together every morning. He would kiss my forehead, talk about our future, and make plans for vacations we never actually took. I thought that was normal. Life got busy, work got hectic, and sometimes plans just stayed plans. Nathan was charming. Everyone loved him. He helped neighbors fix things, always showed up for family dinners, and treated me like a queen in public. People used to tell me how lucky I was to have a husband so devoted and kind. I smiled and agreed because for a long time, I truly believed that. But slowly, something began to shift. Nathan started taking an unusual interest in our finances. It began with small things, asking about bills, expenses, or how much I kept in savings. He said he wanted to learn, so we could plan better for the future. It sounded reasonable, even caring. I wanted us to be a team, so I didn't think twice. Then came the suggestion that we merge our accounts. "It's just easier," he said. "We're married now. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours." His tone was soft but firm, almost rehearsed. I hesitated, explaining that I preferred keeping some things separate, especially since my trust fund wasn't part of our day-to-day life. His smile faded for a second, just a flicker, but enough for me to notice. After that, the guilt trips started in subtle ways. He'd say, "It's weird that you don't trust me," or, "You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." He said it with a calm voice, never angry, but there was weight in those words. I began to feel cornered, like refusing made me a bad wife. Nathan also started managing more decisions without asking. He would transfer small amounts from our shared expenses account to his personal one, saying he needed to pay a bill or handle something urgent. I didn't question it much then, but I noticed the pattern. Every few weeks, a little more would disappear, and his explanations always sounded just convincing enough. The warmth in our home started to cool. Conversations that once felt loving turned tense. He began checking the mail before I got home and often hid his phone when I walked into the room. When I asked what he was doing, he'd laugh it off or change the subject. The biggest red flag came one night when he brought up my trust fund again. He said, "Why let that money sit there doing nothing? We could use it to build something together." His words sounded like teamwork, but something in his eyes told a different story. It wasn't about us, it was about him. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a quiet voice in my mind asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. Something inside me knew my perfect marriage wasn't what it seemed. I just didn't know how deep the cracks already ran. Nathan began to change in ways that were hard to explain at first. He stopped being the warm, understanding man I had married and started acting more controlling, though he disguised it as concern. If I bought something for myself, even something small like a dress or a new book, he would sigh and say, "You really don't think about the future, do you?" It wasn't loud or cruel, but it chipped away at me slowly. He made me question my own choices. When I offered to pay for something, he'd say I was trying to show off. When I didn't, he'd say I was stingy. No matter what I did, it was wrong. I started second-guessing myself constantly, walking on eggshells just to avoid another one of his quiet lectures that always ended with, "I'm just trying to help you be better with money." Soon, he began pulling me away from the people closest to me. He'd roll his eyes when I said I was meeting my best friend, Claire, saying, "She's always jealous of what we have." If I spent time with coworkers after work, he'd make me feel guilty for choosing them over him. It was so gradual that I didn't realize how small my world was becoming. I stopped going out as much. My phone calls with friends got shorter, and eventually, I stopped answering most of them. Nathan made me feel like he was the only person who truly cared about me. When Claire finally managed to see me for coffee one afternoon, she looked worried. She told me Nathan's behavior wasn't normal, that he was slowly cutting me off from everyone. I remember feeling defensive, telling her she didn't understand our marriage. Nathan had warned me she would try to turn me against him, and at that moment, I believed him more than her. That was how deep his influence had gotten. That same week, Nathan brought up the topic of my trust fund again. We were having dinner, and he said it so casually, like it was just an idea he'd been thinking about. "What if we put your trust fund into a joint investment?" he said. "It's just sitting there, Em. We could double it. We both benefit." I froze. My gut twisted, but I forced a smile. He kept talking, painting pictures of our future. Businesses we could start, homes we could buy, trips we could take. It sounded tempting, but something about the way he said "we both benefit" made me uneasy. When I hesitated, he looked disappointed and asked, "Don't you trust me?" That question hit hard. He always used it like a weapon, softly spoken, but sharp enough to cut. I ended up apologizing, trying to explain that it wasn't about trust but about honoring what my grandfather wanted. Nathan nodded slowly, but went quiet for the rest of the night. Later, when I went to bed, I heard him in the other room talking softly on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught the tone, cold, businesslike. That was the first night I felt truly alone in my own house, realizing that maybe the man beside me wasn't protecting me anymore. Maybe he was planning something far worse. One evening, Nathan came home acting unusually kind. He cooked dinner, poured me wine, and kept complimenting me as if he was trying too hard. Something in me felt uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. After dinner, he said he was going to shower, leaving his laptop open on the kitchen counter. Normally, he was very protective of it. He never left it unlocked. But that night he did. At first, I didn't plan to look. I sat at the table staring at the open screen. Then I saw a subject line that froze me. Strategy for fund control before filing. My heart started pounding. My hands shook as I clicked it. The email was between Nathan and someone named Robert Haynes, a real estate lawyer I'd never heard of. The words on the screen made my stomach turn. Nathan had been discussing how to get legal control over my trust fund before initiating a divorce. The emails talked about creating a trail of instability and documenting erratic behavior to support incapacity claims. He was planning to make it look like I wasn't mentally fit to manage my finances. He even mentioned things like me being impulsive, emotionally unstable, and financially reckless. Every one of those descriptions came from moments he had pushed me into reacting, then later called me too emotional. There were attachments too, drafts of fake reports and notes suggesting how to manipulate my doctor into believing I needed medication. One message even said, "Once she's labeled unfit, we can get court approval for fund management transfer." Reading those words made me feel sick. The man I loved, the man I trusted with my life, had been planning to destroy my reputation and take everything my grandfather worked for. I sat there, staring at the screen, my chest tight, struggling to breathe. For a long time, I couldn't move. Every moment we had shared, the smiles, the dinners, the nights he held me, suddenly felt like lies. It all made sense now. The emotional control, the isolation, the constant pressure about the money. It was all leading to this. I quietly took pictures of every email with my phone, making sure I had proof. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to stay calm. When I heard the shower stop, I quickly locked the screen, put the laptop back exactly how it was, and went to the living room as if nothing happened. Nathan came out a few minutes later, smiling like everything was normal. He kissed my forehead and said, "You look tired, sweetheart." I managed a small smile, hiding the storm inside me. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every lie. Every moment he made me feel crazy for protecting myself. By morning, the fear had settled into something else, cold, quiet determination. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. I had to be smart, because now I understood who I was dealing with. The man sleeping next to me wasn't my husband anymore. He was my enemy, and I needed to make sure he never saw me coming, planning something far worse. That night changed everything for me. I felt like my entire world had collapsed, but I knew I couldn't fall apart. I had to stay calm, act normal, and pretend I didn't know anything. Every time Nathan spoke to me after that, I had to remind myself not to react. I smiled when he smiled, nodded when he talked, and even laughed at his jokes. Inside, though, I was breaking. The man I once loved was now the same person I had to protect myself from. I started planning quietly. The next morning, I bought a small notebook and began writing everything down: dates, conversations, strange behaviors, anything that could later prove what he was doing. I hid my phone carefully and started recording certain moments when he talked about money or tried to manipulate me. Sometimes it felt dangerous just existing next to him, but I knew if I slipped, everything could fall apart. A few days later, I decided to contact Claire again. I hadn't spoken to her properly in months because of Nathan's control, but I needed someone I could trust. When she saw me, her face showed pure shock. She said I looked exhausted. I didn't tell her everything at first, just that I needed help finding my grandfather's old attorney, Mr. Langston. She didn't ask too many questions, just promised she would help me. When I finally reached Mr. Langston, he was kind and calm, like he had been years ago when my grandfather passed. I told him I was worried someone might be trying to access my trust fund. His voice became serious. He asked for Nathan's full name, then went silent for a moment. Finally, he said, "Emma, your husband contacted my office 2 weeks ago. He claimed he was managing your finances on your behalf." My heart dropped. He told me Nathan had asked for detailed information about the trust, pretending he was updating legal documents for me. Thankfully, Mr. Langston's office had refused to release anything without my direct approval. That confirmed everything I feared. Nathan was already trying to take control behind my back. After that call, something inside me hardened. I realized there was no way to save the marriage. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan to destroy me completely. I thanked Mr. Langston, promised to stay in touch, and started making copies of every piece of evidence I had gathered. I hid a backup flash drive in a place Nathan would never look, inside an old book my grandfather had given me. At home, Nathan continued acting as if everything was fine. He still kissed me goodbye every morning, still called me beautiful, still made plans for our future. I played along, but my heart had turned to stone. Every word he said now sounded like poison. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. I needed more proof, a solid plan, and a safe way out. Each day, I reminded myself, patience is power. Nathan thought he was in control, but he had no idea that the woman he underestimated was already building a quiet storms behind her calm smile. After weeks of pretending, I finally decided it was time to end the game on my terms. I had gathered enough proof, emails, recordings, and copies of everything Nathan had tried to do. When I met again with Mr. Langston, he told me I needed a strong legal move that would expose Nathan without giving him any chance to twist the story. Together, we came up with a plan that would let him trap himself with his own words. I knew Nathan still wanted access to my trust fund, and I also knew his pride wouldn't let him give up easily. So, one evening, I told him I had been thinking about his joint investment idea. His eyes lit up the moment I said it. He tried to act casual, but I could see the excitement in his face. I told him I wanted to meet with a lawyer first to make sure everything was done properly. He agreed without hesitation, probably believing I was finally giving in. The next few days were hard. Acting like I trusted him again made me sick, but I did it anyway. I needed him to believe I had changed my mind. My lawyer helped me prepare a set of papers that looked official, but had nothing to do with transferring my trust fund. They were actually a prenuptial fraud waiver and a legal package of evidence already signed and ready to be filed in court. All I had to do was get Nathan to reveal the truth out loud. On the day of the meeting, I wore a small recording device hidden under my blouse. It was my only chance to capture his real intentions. We met at a quiet conference room downtown. Nathan walked in smiling, acting confident, shaking hands with my lawyer like everything was going according to his plan. He didn't notice anything unusual. We sat down, and he began talking about how this investment would secure our future. My lawyer played along, asking simple questions that guided the conversation. Then Nathan said the words that changed everything. "Look," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Once the transfer is done, it's all ours. She'll still have her name on it, but I'll manage it. Either way, I'll get what's mine, one way or another." I kept my expression calm, even though my heart was pounding. My lawyer nodded and said he'd finalize everything soon. Nathan signed the fake papers with a confident smile, not realizing he had just signed the evidence that would destroy his plan. When we left the building, I thanked him for trusting me, keeping my voice steady even though every part of me wanted to scream. That night, I went straight to my lawyer's office. We transferred the recording, filed the fraud waiver, and attached the evidence packet. Nathan had no idea that by morning, everything he'd built on lies would begin to crumble. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The fear that had followed me every day was replaced by quiet power. He thought he was winning, but he had just walked straight into the trap I set for him. Storm behind her calm. Smile. Smile. The morning after the meeting, I woke up earlier than usual. My hands were shaking as I got ready, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from adrenaline. I knew that by the end of that day, everything would change. I went straight to my lawyer's office with the signed documents, the audio recording, and every bit of proof I had collected. He reviewed everything carefully, then looked up at me and said, "It's time." We filed the full case packet that morning. My lawyer contacted the court, and within hours, orders were issued to freeze all trust-related accounts. That meant Nathan couldn't touch a single dollar. It also meant his usual access to the joint household account was under review. I felt nervous, but a part of me finally felt free. By afternoon, the trap had already started to close. Nathan was out running errands when it began. I received the first call from him around 3 p.m. His voice was sharp. "Emma, did you use the wrong card? None of mine are working." I told him calmly that I didn't know and that maybe the bank system was down. He cursed under his breath and hung up. An hour later, he stormed into the house, red-faced and angry. He threw his keys on the counter and shouted, "What the hell did you do? They said the accounts are frozen." I stayed seated at the kitchen table, pretending to be confused. "I'm not sure what's going on, Nathan," I said softly. "Maybe you should call the bank again." He paced the floor, muttering to himself. "You ruined everything," he finally shouted, slamming his hand against the counter. "Everything I worked for." That sentence told me more than he realized. It wasn't about us. It was about him and his plan falling apart. I looked at him and said quietly, "I think you should leave." He froze, not expecting that reaction. "What?" he asked, his voice shaking between anger and disbelief. I stood up slowly, keeping my voice steady. "I know everything, Nathan. The emails, the lawyer, the plan to make me look unstable. It's over." For a few seconds, he just stared at me. Then his face went pale. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said weakly. But the way he said it, the sudden fear in his eyes, told me he knew I had him. He grabbed his coat and stormed out without another word. The moment the door closed, I let out a long breath. My lawyer called later that evening to confirm the fraud and coercion charges were filed. The evidence, including the audio recording, was already with the authorities. Everything Nathan had said during that meeting would now be used against him. Within days, the legal papers were served. Nathan tried calling, texting, even showing up at my office, but I didn't answer or see him. My lawyer made sure all communication went through official channels. For the first time since this nightmare began, I slept peacefully. The man who tried to take everything from me had just lost the one thing he thought he controlled: me. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. Nathan tried to fight back at first, refusing to believe he had lost control. He hired a lawyer and claimed that I had been mentally unstable, saying he was only trying to protect me. It was almost unbelievable how easily he twisted everything. He tried to play the victim, saying I had set him up, that I was paranoid, and that I'd misunderstood his intentions. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when it's recorded. The moment my lawyer handed over the audio file, everything changed. The recording clearly captured Nathan admitting that he planned to take control of my trust fund and saying he would get what's mine, one way or another. Hearing his own voice made it impossible for him to deny what he'd done. The emails, the fake legal drafts, and the messages to the real estate lawyer all backed it up. His entire story crumbled in a matter of days. Nathan's lawyer tried to defend him at first, but once he saw the forged documents Nathan had created, he withdrew from the case completely. The forgeries were enough to put Nathan in serious legal trouble. It turned out he had even tried to use a falsified medical note about me, one he never thought would be traced back to him. But the investigators found everything. Each lie connected to another, forming a full picture of what he had planned. In court, Nathan looked nothing like the confident man I had once known. He avoided my eyes and barely spoke. His claims about me being unstable backfired completely when the judge heard the recordings of him gaslighting and belittling me. The calm tone in his voice as he manipulated me said everything. The courtroom was silent as the judge played that clip. I sat there quietly, my hands folded in my lap, letting the truth speak for itself. After the evidence was presented, it was clear he had no case. His reputation in the community fell apart almost overnight. The people who once saw him as charming and kind now saw him for what he truly was, a liar and a fraud. The business partners he had bragged about cut ties with him. His social circle vanished. Through it all, I kept my silence. I didn't argue, didn't post anything, didn't try to defend myself publicly. My calmness became my strength. Every time I appeared in court or spoke with my lawyer, I stayed composed. That quiet confidence unsettled Nathan more than anything I could have said. When it was finally over, I walked out of that courtroom free. I didn't cry or shout. I just took a deep breath and let the weight of it all lift off me. Nathan had tried to break me, to take everything I owned, but instead, he lost everything that mattered to him. I learned that sometimes revenge doesn't come from anger or loud words. It comes from silence, from patience, and from knowing when to let the truth do all the talking. Months passed before the court finally gave its decision. Emma sat quietly in the courtroom, her hands resting on her lap, listening as the judge read the verdict. Nathan was found guilty of attempted financial fraud and defamation. Every lie he had told, every forged document, and every cruel manipulation had finally caught up with him. The judge's words felt like the closing of a long, painful chapter. Nathan's face was pale and expressionless. He tried to speak, but his lawyer stopped him. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was too strong, the recordings too clear, and the witnesses too many. His attempt to destroy Emma's name and take her money had turned into his own downfall. Emma kept her trust fund completely intact. The court confirmed that she had full legal control over it, and no one else, not even a spouse, could ever claim access again. Along with that, the judge granted her a restraining order against Nathan. He was forbidden from contacting her in any form. No calls, no messages, no approach within 100 yards. For the first time in years, Emma felt safe. When she stepped outside the courthouse that day, the air felt different. The sky was clear, and for a moment, she just stood still, breathing deeply. The tension that had followed her for so long began to fade. Every painful night, every tear, every lie she had endured, it all seemed distant now. She realized she was finally free, not just from Nathan, but from the fear and doubt he had planted in her mind. Reporters were waiting near the steps, asking questions, calling her name, but Emma didn't stop. She simply walked past them, her expression calm. She didn't need to explain herself or tell her story anymore. The truth had already spoken for her in court. Claire met her outside and hugged her tightly. It had been a long journey for both of them. "It's over," Claire whispered, and Emma nodded, her eyes glistening, not from sadness but from relief. That evening, Emma sat alone in her living room. The house was quiet, filled with peace instead of tension. She made herself tea, opened the windows, and let the breeze move through the space. There were no more secrets, no hidden plans, no watching over her shoulder. She was in control of her life again. She spent the following weeks focusing on herself, reading, traveling, and reconnecting with people she had lost touch with. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence. Her grandfather's trust fund, once a source of manipulation, now became a tool for good. Emma began donating to charities and funding programs for women facing financial abuse. Every step forward reminded her of how far she had come. She no longer needed revenge or validation, just peace. As she looked out at the sunset one evening, she smiled quietly. The storm had passed. Her freedom wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, steady, and entirely hers. After the court case ended, Emma decided she needed a completely new beginning. She packed up her belongings, sold the house in Austin, and moved to a small coastal town in Oregon. The town was quiet, filled with the sound of waves and the smell of salt in the air. For the first time in a long while, she woke up without anxiety sitting on her chest. She could finally breathe. Her new home was a small cottage near the water. Every morning, she made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sun rise over the ocean. The waves came and went steady and calm, just like the peace she had been searching for. She didn't need fancy things or noise anymore. What she needed was clarity, and she finally had it. Days passed quietly. Emma started working remotely again, slowly rebuilding her professional life. She met kind neighbors who didn't ask too many questions, who saw her simply as Emma, the woman who loved books, sunsets, and morning walks on the beach. There was freedom in anonymity. In those still moments, Emma often found herself thinking back, not with anger, but with understanding. She realized that love should never come with conditions, control, or fear. What Nathan had called love was never truly love. It was a transaction, an act built on greed and manipulation. She saw now how easily kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and how trust can be used as a weapon by the wrong person. One morning, as she stood by the window with her coffee, the sun slowly rising over the horizon, she whispered to herself, "He thought he was playing me." But he underestimated the woman who learned to play smarter. It wasn't a statement of pride or revenge, it was truth. She had survived not by fighting louder, but by thinking wiser, by staying calm when he expected her to break. Her story didn't end with revenge or victory, it ended with peace. Emma started writing in a journal again, something she had stopped years ago. Her entries weren't about pain anymore, but about lessons on strength, self-worth, and boundaries. She wanted to remind herself that the person she became was not the same woman Nathan tried to control. Sometimes, she received letters from women who had gone through similar experiences. Women who found courage in her quiet strength. Emma always replied, gently reminding them that it's never foolish to love, but it's dangerous to forget yourself in the process. She often walked along the beach in the evenings, the cool breeze brushing against her face. The water shimmered under the soft light, endless and peaceful. She realized that her heart, though bruised, was still capable of love, but this time, love for herself. Her story became a silent reminder, not just for others, but for herself. Never let anyone weaponize your heart, and never let your trust be used against you. True peace, she learned, doesn't come from what you win or lose. It comes from knowing who you are when the storm is over.